Hi, I'm back. Um, when you see me looking down, um, I'll be reading sometimes. I'll be from my memoir, from my book, um, My Broken Road to Love, which I've earlier introduced. Yeah, so I'm speaking to you as an individual, and I'd like you to see this as a one-on-one, I guess, because I'd like to be personal with you if this is for you, because it's not for everyone. So if this is for you, this is me communicating to you, though through a platform, but I just actually would like to feel you and know that I'm talking to someone. I know that um, there are things that you've prayed for. And mainly this book is really about three things. And I'm talking to three different individuals so that you know whether this book is actually or this podcast and memoir and channel is for you. I am writing to three people so that you may know whether this applies to you or it doesn't apply to you. I'm writing about my life and my relationships because that's what God used for me. It's my relationships and my broken relationships and how He brought me out of it. So I'm speaking to those who have had, which is a bigger chunk of people who've had, and mostly in the church, outside the church, in the church, whoever it is, that have struggled in their relationships. And I'm sharing to you so that you know that some of these struggles are caused by certain aspects of our lives, are caused by certain decisions that, if avoided, could lead to success. Okay, so that is one set of people. The other set of people that I'd like to talk to are those that have a calling on their life. Because when there's a calling on your life, God uses a certain aspect of your life to teach you lessons to prepare you for your calling. In my case, I have a calling, and my calling is to counsel people. It's sort of a marriage counseling calling, to help people, you know, in their relationships, especially relationships that lead to marriage. That's what God used. But then it might be something else for you. So I'd like you to see this not particularly as an issue about relationships, but as an issue about what you might have to go through as God prepares you for your calling. Because this for me is not just about relationships, it's about a calling on my life. And what I've gone through might not be something that a person who's not called for this will have to go through. I've had to go through a lot of turbulence because of the training that God needed me to go through. So that's for those who are called. And then the other aspect of people that I am speaking to are those that have been called to break generational curses. And to be able to break generational curses is a huge calling. That you may have, and it requires a lot of sacrifice on your part, because it requires purity, and it requires for you to live in purity, for you to actually be able to face the giants that have stood in your family generation for years. You see, when Jesus was used as a sacrifice, there was a reason, because he was blameless, he had no blemish, and it could only take a person without blemish to be able to stand and break whatever it is that stood in our way. A layman, because we're all, you know, our righteousness is as filthy rags. None of us would have qualified to be able to redeem people from sin. It had to take an unblemished man. So even as you stand in the gap for your family, there are certain things that, I mean, I had prayed for my family all my life, but there were certain sacrifices I had to make. It's like you put your whole life on hold and you're like, okay, fine, I'm a sacrifice. And the things I struggled to come out of, I had to just, do it. That's to the three people. So the three people are those who are in relationships, and how you can succeed at relationships without going through cycles. And the second set of people is those that have a calling on their lives, and how God trains you for the calling, the delays and all that. And those are the things that I'm going to talk about. And then those who are now called to break generational curses. Yeah. So when I look down, just know that I'm trying to read from my memoir, because that's what I'm trying to share here. I have an unpublished book I've shared earlier that I don't know if I publish it, if God allows me to publish it, but God has asked me to start this channel to hopefully help someone, because I was also helped in this same way. Okay, so I hope this comes out as help for somebody. So, as we all know, I mean, growing up, we've read all these love stories, and also even in the church, a lot of successful people have written books on love and how to succeed on love. And I am writing a success book on love, but it comes from a totally different angle, because I was a failure. I would call myself, and the church would call me a failure, because I am divorced. I had relationships that I shouldn't have been in. And then God gave me the success. Okay. So when you read most books, there'll be books by those people who have never had to, make mistakes and all that. The people I earlier said, I will call them natural wonders of the world. Okay. So every time I've read those books from the successful people, I've said, from the so-called successful people, I've said, I always used to feel low, and I'm like, what about me? Does it mean I failed? Does it mean I'm just gonna die like this? I mean, the church even calls me a failure. A divorced person is called a failure. They don't even want to talk about you. So what about me? What about you who has made mistakes? What about you who has come out of a marriage? What about you who has been rejected? What about you? Does it mean you don't have hope? What about the grace of God? He says there's grace. As much as I'll make mistakes, there's grace. How can I be frowned upon all my life? Is this what's going to be written about me? Those are questions you're probably asking yourself, right? So because I've gone through all the back and forth, all the cycles, I'm not also condoning. I'm also not condoning irresponsibility, because I condoned it. That's why I went through cycles. But then I had to come to myself and say, okay, there's no compromise here. There's a way in which things need to go. So, and I'm talking to someone who has to come to that stage. I'm not talking to the person who thinks it's okay to just live anyhow and will be able to succeed afterwards. It is not possible. I'm talking to someone who's come to the end of themselves and are able to say, okay, I'm putting my life on the line. I need to succeed in this. Okay. And to succeed is not to cut corners. It does not work like that. If you cut corners, you're going to go around the circle again until you learn the lesson. That's why I had to go round and round and round and round in those circles until I came to the end of myself. And then God said, now write a book since you've learned your lesson. Okay. So, and it is very important for me to mention that to talk about marriage first, to just give you a background or information on what marriage should be, God's ideal marriage. And Pastor Tony Evans has said this about the ideal marriage. He said, when God established marriage, he established it to last. It is only when we have removed ourselves from his purpose for our relationships that we face the untimely unraveling of what's meant to be permanently satisfying. Kingdom couples share a purpose, not just passion. Emotions change, but the purpose remains and is what can tie two people together until death do them part. Our marriages today are crumbling at such a high rate, not because we no longer get along, but because we have lost sight of the blessing tied to biblical marriage. Marriage is not merely a social contract. That is what I thought. Like, okay, fine, I want to be with someone. It's all about, they can't eat, can't sleep. No. It is a sacred covenant. A God ordained marriage is defined as a covenantal union between a man and a woman who commit themselves to function in unison under divine authority in order to replicate God's image and expand his rule in the world through both their individual and joint callings. The unifying central theme throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, is the glory of God and the advancement of his kingdom. That's why you're going to be together. That's why God wants you to be together. It's not all those bubbly things that you think about. Okay? It is about the advancement of his kingdom. The closer God and his rule are tied to the definition of marriage, the more order, productivity, and fulfillment are experienced in our marriages. And the further away God and his rule are, the more chaos occurs in the home. His mercies are new every morning. A time will come when you desperately need to seek God and plead for his mercy for the role you played that led to the dissolution of your marriage. You have to take the journey backwards so that you can take responsibility for your mistakes for which you seek his mercies. Only the mercies of God will give you a second chance. There is no sin that is unforgivable. Mercy is described as forgiveness of the withholding of deserved punishment. So though there's mercy, there's a responsibility on your part to understand that moving forward, it has to be done God's way. And I've told you God's way. God's way is that you're in unison. God's way is that a union that you would want to go to is about the advancement of God's kingdom, about purpose. Okay? And purpose doesn't mean that you have to be on a pulpit. Purpose does not mean that you have to necessarily go around preaching the gospel. Purpose can even just be raising great children. Purpose is in many ways. God may bless you with children who of purpose, will give you children who are blessed, will give you the responsibility to just raise great children. Advancement of God's kingdom could just mean that you're a great example of a loving couple to people who are coming after you. It's about advancing the kingdom. It's not about you living separate lives that are not in unison. You have to be in unison, okay? So, as you journey in this with me, I need you to understand that you may be desiring marriage again, even if you erred. And there is nothing wrong with that as long as you are truly repentant, so that the mercies of God can be accessible to you. And I cry for you and with you that the mercies of God may prevail. Mercy, like I said, is compassion, is the compassion of God, and is waiting for you to come boldly before his throne to get the mercy, boldly before the throne of grace. Okay. Is there hope for you? There is hope for you. Because as much as there's an ideal way of how a marriage should be, there are those of us who've made mistakes. So the question I would always ask myself when I'd see those books on love and how people succeeded and never make mistakes is, but what about those that do get a divorce? Not once, maybe not even twice, but are repentant and are willing to allow God to be their guide in their next. Okay? Repentance being the change of heart and mind that brings us closer to God. Repentance that includes turning away from our mistakes and turning to God for forgiveness. What about those that have not been so lucky to find the right people? People who refuse to commit to them. What about those that have had to divorce because of adultery? What about those that are in physically and emotionally abusive marriages? What about those that have failed because of their own personal weaknesses, but have desperately sought counseling and hopefully healing? What about those that have generational patterns that have followed them, but have sought deliverance? What about those that have warfare on a daily? I once knew a woman who, at 50 years old, had never been proposed to by any man. So they were childless and still a virgin, yet they desired marriage desperately. They were under bondage of witchcraft until they were prayed for and received deliverance. What about that one? What about those that did get married before they matured and now they are grown and want to finally settle down? There are more of these than those that are blessed with stable relationships. And I'm talking about millions of people globally, and particularly, and it is particularly to these people that I write and speak about, to give them hope that even if they fall, they can still get back up and have a happily ever after, a love that they longed for when they were a little boy, a little girl. I have written this book, this memoir, and I'm addressing this YouTube channel to tell them that they should not succumb to condemnation, that God will work out everything that they have gone through for their good, even if their failure was due to their own mistake. As it is written in John chapter 8, verse 7, they kept demanding an answer. So he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." I also write to those that intend to get married for the first time. It might be your first time. That you would learn from my journey and hopefully and prayerfully avoid the mistakes that I made. Okay? And a lot of you have prayed for a perfect relationship. Those that are starting and those that have been in relationship over and over again. When I did pray, I've prayed all my life. When I prayed for a relationship, chaos ensued. Okay? And a lot of times when you pray for something, anything, whatever it is that you pray for, there's a certain pattern that starts happening in your life. You start going, chaos just suddenly comes from nowhere. Okay? And a lot of times we look at chaos and think this is what the answer is. And we think it will never get resolved. But a lot of times when chaos comes, God is trying to build something in us. He'll start breaking certain things, certain habits. He'll start breaking certain relationships. He'll start breaking things so that he can start building. And when we see all the broken aspects and places of our lives, we think God is not answering. But because we're looking for the miracle that we prayed for, we're just looking for the miracle. I want to see the relationship. I want to see the marriage. But little do we know that we have, because of the turmoil and the things that we have gone through in life, they have built certain strongholds in our lives and in our souls that are so embedded that no matter what relationship we'll go into, we will bleed on the people that are coming. We will also destroy the people that are coming, and God would not want that to happen. So what he starts doing is he starts breaking things up so that he builds you afresh. And little do we know again that actually the miracles are already happening, but we can't see the miracles. They look like things are falling apart, but the miracle has already started, though we don't see it. Just reflect on your life. and just look back. And most of you who have succeeded are going to see, who are in the process of success, are going to see that whatever it is that you have become, and you look back at those things that have broken down, you see and notice that actually the miracle started then. The miracle started then. We want to see the miracle in a certain way, and it is coming. Okay? It is coming. The way you want to see it is coming. But the bigger miracle is really God rebuilding your foundation. That is the bigger miracle. And the bigger miracle even is for instance, like in my life, where I went through what I went through. The bigger miracle out of all of this, out of all the mistakes I ever made, is that I'm able to speak to you, is that I'm able to learn lessons that you don't need to learn. I'm able to go through things that you don't need to go through. And I'm able to tell you the experiences that I went through that were unnecessary. I didn't have to go through the cycles, but God allowed me to go through them so that I may tell you that this was caused by this, and that's why the cycle repeated. That is the biggest miracle. The biggest miracle is me coming to you to help you. That is the bigger miracle. It's not me being, okay, now I'm with this man. Okay. Oh, and then what? And then what? It is not as glamorous as we have it in our heads. The real glamour is being able to help the millions of people. The real glamour is able to remove someone from captivity, the captivity that I was in. Okay? I can live in glamour with my husband every day. And then I wake up the next day and then there's glamour and then what? Okay? So it gives me great joy and great pleasure to be able to help you and be able to walk this journey with you. In a later I think in my next video, I'm going to talk about also the fact that some of you have come out of divorce and you've condemned yourself. But there are certain reasons why there's certain aspects of divorce that God will allow. Okay? God will allow divorce, rather, let me rephrase it. God will allow divorce in certain aspects. Okay, the Bible will allow divorce in certain aspects, and I'm going to cover that in a later video. So it was lovely talking to you. Have a great day, and I love you, love you, love you.